Let's talk about why the inner critic is loudest when you start growing. If your inner critic gets louder right when things start working, that voice seems like it just amps up a little bit. Right when you gain momentum, you start doubting yourself. Right when you're about to level up, there's a reason for that. And this voice doesn't get loud when you're failing. That's not what's happening. It gets loud when you're growing. Welcome back to Creator Metaphysics. Here's the truth that every creator has to understand about that inner critic. The inner critic is loudest not during failure, but during growth. This is not because you're doing something wrong, it's because you're doing something new. And as we break this open, we realize that this inner critic thinks that familiar is safe. Think of it as a safety voice. To your inner critic, familiar feels safe, predictable. Things that are predictable feel safe. Routine feels safe. Staying small feels safe. Not being seen feels safe. That voice was built in a time where being seen didn't feel safe. Think about lions and tigers and bears. The last thing you want is for these big, mean, vicious animals to see you because that means danger. So your inner critic learns stay where things are known. Stay where nothing can go wrong. Stay where we're safe. I remember there was a time where things actually started going really well for me. Things started working. Everything was falling into place. I was creating more. I was showing up more. People were starting to respond. And that's when the voice got louder. Not quieter, got louder. That inner critic started saying things like, don't mess this up. What if you can't keep this up? What if people start expecting more from you? What are you going to do then? How are you going to respond to that? Can you keep up with that? It didn't show up when I was stuck. It showed up when I started moving forward. Look at your own experience. When does that voice get the loudest for you? Is it when nothing's happening, everything's all quiet, and you have time to listen to it? Or is it right when things start to shift? Right when you start to grow? You see, growth feels like risk to the mind. Why? Because growth changes things. Growth causes you to become more visible, more open, more expressive, more aligned. And even though those are good things, to your inner critic, this feels like risk because it's change. And change is a threat to our safety. Let's talk about something that every creator deals with. When you produce content, there's that moment right before you post it. There were times where I'd be right at the edge, ready to post something, ready to share, ready to move forward. And that's when everything would spike. Doubt, that feeling of doubt would spike. Overthinking. My brain would kick into overdrive. I start thinking about everything. I start second guessing myself. Like, is this really what I want to do? And if it is what I want to do, is it really how I want to do it? I start asking myself, like, is this good enough? Should I wait before I do this? Maybe I need to fix one more thing. I can change this over here. I can change that. You ever get that feeling where it's just like something needs to be improved before you can actually post the thing? But if I was honest, nothing was actually wrong. I was just at a new level. Be real with yourself. How often do you stop right before you move forward? How often do you hesitate at the exact moment that you should be taking action? That moment is not weakness, it's a threshold. And that inner critic, that inner voice gets loud at the threshold. There are moments where that voice spikes right before you post something, right before you record something, right before you share that information that needs to be expressed, right before you try something new. And those moments feel like fear and tension. It's this noise in your head. You feel uncertain. But what's really happening is this: you're stepping out of the old version of you and into something new. And even though there's some friction there, even though it can be scary, even though it can be hard, you got to cross that line anyway. I remember catching that moment clearly. I was about to pull back again. Same pattern, just this pattern repeating itself. Same hesitation. But this time, I didn't stop. I posted anyway. And guess what? Nothing bad happened. There was no collapse. There was no disaster. Just movement. And that's when I realized that the fear wasn't the truth. It was just the edge. So ask yourself, what are you standing on the edge of right now? What are you about to step into that you keep pulling back from? Odds are there's something that makes you feel kind of strange on the inside when you're growing. And to be honest, the reason for that is because growth feels like you're losing the old you. That's what that feeling is. Growth isn't about what you do, it's about who you become. And when you start changing, your old patterns start to fall away. To your inner critic, that feels like loss of control, loss of safety, loss of what's familiar. So it reacts, it gets louder, it gets more intense, more convincing. It's fighting for the survival of the old you. But let me ask you this: is it trying to stop you, or is it reacting to you changing? Because those two things are not the same thing. If you're listening to this and something is starting to click, but you feel like you're stuck in the same patterns, this is exactly why I wrote Awaken the Creator Within. Because most creators don't have a skill problem, they have a self perception problem. In the book, I break down why that happens, where it comes from, and how to actually move through it. The link to the book is in the description. All right, let's keep going. That loud critic, that means you're growing. Here's the shift you need to make. A loud critic is not a bad sign. It's a growth signal. It shows up when you're about to evolve, when you're stepping into something bigger, when you're becoming more visible, you're moving into a new level. And most people think that, I must not be ready if I'm doubting myself like this. But the truth is, you're closer than you think. We have to learn to move forward anyway. When that voice gets loud, you don't wait for it to go away. You recognize it, you understand it, and you move anyway. Ask yourself this: can I take one step forward, even with this voice in my head? Because that's the real shift. Action breaks the pattern, movement builds trust. And every time you move forward, that voice loses its power, loses that control it has over you. Remember this: your inner critic gets loud when you're stepping into something new. And this is not because you're not ready, but because you are. You are moving beyond who you used to be and into who you're becoming. So the next time that voice gets loud, don't take it as a warning, take it as a signal. You're growing. And that's exactly where you're supposed to be.